In response to Donald Trump and Israel's ongoing war in Iran, Pope Leo released this poignant, level-headed statement, among others, denouncing the bloodshed unfolding in the Middle East. But it was these two back-to-back posts that apparently struck a nerve with the Trump administration in particular, which led to this testy exchange between a reporter and professional propagandist, Karoline Leavitt, who just so happens to be Catholic herself.
Since you mentioned Easter and prayers, I wanted to ask you about something the Pope said yesterday. So Pope Leo said yesterday, and I quote him, "God does not listen to the prayer of those who wage war." Can you comment on that?
I think our nation was a nation founded 250 years ago almost on Judeo-Christian values, and we've seen presidents, we've seen the leaders of the Department of War, and we've seen our troops go to prayer during the most turbulent times in our nation's history. And I don't think there's anything wrong with our military leaders or with the president calling on the American people to pray for our service members and those who are serving our country overseas. In fact, I think it's a very noble thing to do. And if you talk to many service members, they will tell you they appreciate the prayers and support from the Commander-in-Chief and from his cabinet.
So let me make sure I have this right. A reporter asked the White House press secretary, a Catholic woman, to comment on a direct statement from the Pope. Pope Leo said, and I quote, "God does not listen to the prayer of those who wage war." That is not ambiguous. That is the head of the Catholic Church saying that the prayers of war makers go unanswered. And Karoline Leavitt's response was to invoke Judeo-Christian values. Talk about how this nation was founded 250 years ago, praise the Department of War, and yes, she actually called it the Department of War, and say it's noble for the president to ask people to pray for the troops. She answered a question about the Pope condemning war by celebrating the people waging it. That's not a dodge. That is a repudiation. The press secretary of the United States just told the Pope that his moral authority does not apply here. And this is the same administration that wraps itself in Christianity every single day. The same people who push the Bible and who invoke God at every rally, who claim divine mandate for their agenda. But the moment the actual leader of 1 billion Catholics says something they do not want to hear, the moment he says the wars are the fruit of the idolatry of power and money, that peace is the work of purified hearts, they don't want to hear it. Suddenly the Pope is just another voice to be managed, and this is an ongoing, almost certainly illegal war that will fundamentally change the world. That is the context Leavitt is dodging. And then Pope Leo posted this. He prayed for the maritime workers killed in the Strait of Hormuz conflict, for the wounded, for families, for the migrants who drowned off the coast of Crete. He said, land, sky, and sea were all created for life and peace. That is the moral clarity that is supposed to come from religious leadership, and it stands in direct opposition to everything Karoline Leavitt's boss is doing, because Donald Trump is not praying for the dead, he is creating them. He's not mourning the maritime workers caught in the crossfire of his war. He is not thinking about the migrants drowning in the Mediterranean while the world's attention is focused on bombs. Karoline Leavitt's job, her entire function at that podium is to make sure you never think too hard about any of that. She is not a press secretary, folks. She is an insulation layer between this administration's actions and your conscience.
The objectives of Operation Epic Fury are as follows: destroying the Iranian Navy, destroying their ballistic missiles, dismantling their defense industrial infrastructure that produces those weapons that have long threatened the United States and our allies, and then, of course, preventing Iran from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. The full reopening of the strait is something the administration is working towards, but the core objectives of the operation have been clearly defined for the American people by the Commander-in-Chief.
The President posted this morning about his threat that on leaving Iran, he said we might be blowing up and completely obliterating all of their electric generating plants, oil wells, Harg Island, and possibly all desalinization plants. Under international law, striking civilian infrastructure like that is generally prohibited. Why is the president threatening what would amount to potentially a war crime with the U.S. military? And how do you square that with the administration repeatedly saying that the U.S. does not target civilians?
Look, the president has made it quite clear to the Iranian regime at this moment in time, as evidenced by the statement that you just read, that their best move is to make a deal, or else the United States Armed Forces has capabilities beyond their wildest imagination, and the president is not afraid to use them. That's not what I said, Garrett. And you're saying the word potential for a reason, because I'm sure some experts are telling you that in your ear to try to ask me that question. Of course, this administration and the United States Armed Forces will always act within the confines of the law. But with respect to achieving the full objectives of Operation Epic Fury, President Trump is going to move forward unabated, and he expects the Iranian regime to make a deal with the administration.
To that end, which of
Haley,
those objectives would destroying a desalination plant most help?
Haley, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline.
And that is why Garrett Hockey's follow-up question was so important, because he had just listened to Leavitt lay out the so-called objectives of Operation Epic Fury. Destroy the Iranian Navy, destroy their ballistic missiles, dismantle their defense infrastructure, prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Okay, fine, those are military targets. But then Hockey followed up with this. The president posted that morning about potentially blowing up all of Iran's electric generating plants, their oil wells, Karg Island. And this is the one, all of their desalination plants. And Hockey pointed out what should be obvious. Under international law, striking civilian infrastructure like that is generally prohibited. So he asked the direct question, why is the president threatening what would amount to a war crime? And Leavitt could not answer it. She would not answer it because there is no answer. Destroying a country's desalination plants, the systems that provide clean drinking water to tens of millions of civilians, that's not a military objective. It's a collective punishment. It is the deliberate targeting of a civilian population's ability to survive. No gray area in international law. That is the definition of a war crime. And the president of the United States posted it on social media like it was a threat on a reality show. This is what Pope Leo was talking about. This is why he said God does not listen to the prayers of war makers, because you cannot stand at a podium, invoke God and prayer and Judeo-Christian values, and in the same breath refuse to explain why the president is threatening to cut off drinking water to an entire nation. That is not faith. That is blasphemy wrapped in a flag.
I have to say, I think some of the things that some of the younger people that I talked to were a little bit scary, because they were saying things that sounded a lot like white nationalism. It sounded racist, to be honest.
What did they say?
Well, they were saying basically that the United States was founded by Europeans, and that is the identity of the United States. And it was a mission from God to conquer a land, and the United States was conquered by Europeans, and now that they're blessed, the United States is blessed by God because of conquering the people that lived here before. And it was more about religion and more about Christianity and that identity, and that included things like teaching the Bible in school and teaching it literally, like Noah's flood actually happened. All these things actually happened. So it was very different from the people we talked to before who were like, Trump is number one. This was it seems like it's moving in a different direction that is not Trump. And to me, I find that worrying.
And what Jason Selvig of The Good Liars is describing should alarm every single American, regardless of your faith or your politics, because he's not talking about Trump supporters anymore. He is talking about something that has moved beyond Trump. The young people he is encountering at these events are not just wearing MAGA hats, chanting slogans. They're talking about the United States as a nation conquered by Europeans on a mission from God. They're talking about teaching the Bible literally in public schools. They're talking about white Christian identity as the foundation of American civilization. That is not conservatism. That is not populism. That is Christian nationalism, and it is growing. Selvig said something that should send a chill down your spine. He said ordinary families are telling him their college-age sons are watching Nick Fuentes, people you would not expect. And what these young men are absorbing is not the bumper sticker MAGA of 2016. It is a racialized, theocratic vision of America where Christianity is not just a faith, it is a governing ideology. The Bible replaces the Constitution, where European identity is synonymous with American identity, and where war in the Middle East is not a geopolitical disaster. It is a crusade. That is the thread that connects everything in this video. The Pope says God does not hear the prayers of war makers. Karoline Leavitt says prayer during war is noble. The president threatens war crimes on social media. And a new generation of young Americans is being radicalized into believing that all of this is God's plan, that the conquest is divine, that the cruelty is righteous. Pope Leo sees it. That is why he's speaking out. Because the danger is not just the war in Iran. The danger is a movement that has hijacked Christianity itself, turned the religion of love thy neighbor into a weapon of state power. And if the leaders of the faith do not say something now, the version of Christianity these young people inherit, it will be unrecognizable from the one that built hospitals, fed the poor, stood against empires. It will be the empire.